We're live.
We are live. Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to Earth School Journey. I am your co-host Uni, and this is my co-host and sister Umi Steph. Umi, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm a little hot in the greenhouse, but other than that, I'm doing good today. How about you?
Uh,
How's it going?
Everything's going good. I cannot complain. I have been. Oh, we'll talk about it. We've just been going through these lessons and, just processing everything. As you guys know, this is Earth School Journey where life is the curriculum and experience is the teacher. I get tongue tied there. Um, and today we are continuing our conversation, which this month we are talking about our oneness through nature. And today we're going to be specifically talking about living our oneness through nature. Like, how do we go about living our oneness through nature, with nature? And it has been an amazing month. I've been trying to get outside. This week I kind of slowed down a little bit. It's been super hot. We have another heat wave here. And normally I don't complain about the heat, but it's the heat and it's just a whole lot of other things that have got me just like, I just feel like relaxing as much as possible. So I have been connecting with nature in different ways, listening to sound, um, uh, uh, bites, or you know what I mean, like meditations with rain and water and what do you call those, waterfalls and things like that. But I want to move into this episode because we have a lot to share with you all today, and we want to thank you again for joining us. And I want to start with our one of our opening questions. And the question we have today is, what is nature inviting me to remember about myself today? That's one of the questions that we have. What is nature inviting me to remember about myself today? And the other question we have is, what if nature isn't just something to appreciate, but a relationship to cultivate?
Mm-hmm.
So those are just two questions that we have, and we kind of like to let like let the conversation answer that for us. We like to kind of mull it over a little bit, and maybe we come back to it at the end of today's broadcast. Or if you'd like, maybe you want to share in the comments, um, any response that you have to either of those questions. What is nature inviting me to remember about myself today? And what if nature isn't just something to appreciate, but a relationship to cultivate? And I feel like, again, we've talked how about how passionate we both are about nature, and um, what we want to really convey to people today is that we are all one through nature.
Mm-hmm.
We are all one through nature. Um, Again, last week we talked about exploring our oneness through nature, and we had a really good conversation about nature being a teacher, nature being a healer, what that kind of illusion of separateness does to us, and we actually went pretty in depth on climate change and things of that nature as well, and the divinity of nature. And as usual, I get all passionate about taking care of nature, and I think Umi and I both went on tangents a little
Yeah,
bit, and
definitely.
it was just like, because nature has given so much to us, and
Yes.
we want to honor nature in its entirety and give gratitude. And so we hope that this month is that you get something out of it, and it helps you to connect with nature and appreciate nature maybe a little bit more than you presently do, even if you already do.
Mhm.
So, we're going to jump right into this week's lesson. And we're going to talk about nature and its rhythms and kind of like the living flow of it, and how we learn to eventually want to get into like how we learn to cooperate with life instead of forcing it. And, one of the things that I think is very important to really consider is how nature has different seasons that produce different results. You know what I mean? There are seasons of rest, seasons of growth, seasons of blooming, you know what I mean? Seasons of
Mhm.
harvest. And I think that it's important for us to recognize that there are seasons and understand that just like nature has seasons, we do as well.
Right.
And understanding that that season is like a particular, it's a phase. Essentially, it's like a phase that you're going through. It has its own conditions, its own needs, its own purpose in your life. And it's important to understand what each season is requiring from you. Are you in a season of rest? Are you in a season of preparation, healing, learning, visibility, creating? What season are you in right now? And a season isn't always determined by like what's on the calendar. You
Right.
know, you may be in a winter season, and the person next to you may be in like summer or spring, and outside it could be raining cats and dogs. It may be fall outside. You know what I
Right.
mean? So seasons, when it comes to the human life, is not necessarily determined by the calendar. And even in nature, sometimes you got to think about it. Like there's been times during the winter and people are like, we got record highs and lots of sun, and you know what I mean. So there's just so many different ways to look at different seasons, and understanding that essentially it's temporary. A season
Mhm.
is temporary in your life, and you can take that season and acknowledge it for what it is so that you can get the most out of it. You know what I mean? Umi, what do you think about seasons?
Yeah. So I think that it's really important that we tap back into this idea of seasons and cycles. I feel like we've definitely moved away from, that living seasonally, particularly in tune with nature, eating seasonally, you know what I mean? Paying attention to like how your energy is based on the season. And like you said, the human season may not be in line with nature seasons, but us tapping into nature seasons can give us so much insight. And also just I feel like tapping into nature seasons just improves our quality of life because we're tapping into that natural rhythm. When the days are shorter, we're not meant to work 12-hour days. That's why we don't have as much energy in the winter time because we're not meant for that. It's meant for a time of rest. And yes, you may have a lot of work going on. You may be a student and you're taking exams or whatever, and your human season is not necessarily in tune with that, you know, uh, natural season that it is. And that's okay, right? There are ways that you can still take advantage of that. But I feel like we really get discouraged in life because we expect our seasons to always be, whether it's a negative season or a positive season. I feel like the reason why people get depressed is they're like, oh, everything is always just not going my way. Well, no, you were just in that season. You know what I mean? Or you were in a season that didn't produce the result you wanted because you weren't tapped into the fact that it wasn't time. You weren't paying attention to what season you were in. If you're trying to harvest when you're supposed to be planting, you're going to be disappointed because there's nothing there to harvest. And if you're planting during harvest season, well, you're missing out, and you can't be mad that you missed out because you didn't do what the season called for. So I definitely feel like we have to really tap back in to what nature is teaching us about seasons, because nature is so abundant and so productive and so harmonious, right? But it respects the seasons. It doesn't have a choice like we do, right? But choice, while we value this as humans, has messed us up more, more than anything else, right? And I think specifically when it comes to women, we really need to tap back into the natural seasons and cycles of the earth and of our bodies, because as a part of nature, our bodies are nature. Our bodies are tapped into a more or less 28-day cycle like the moon. And I feel like a lot of us are, because particularly in the United States, that there's people having such issues with their cycles, so much pain, so much heavy bleeding, fibroids, PCOS, all of these things. I feel like a lot of it is because we are just not tapped in anymore, and we try to push our bodies to do things out of season, and we're just not designed that way. But in trying to make ourselves separate from nature and trying to be above nature and to command nature, we have done that even to our bodies. And we're not tapping into those natural cycles, and a woman who's on her cycle and needs a day or two of rest is not allowed to have that anymore. You have to go to work, you have to go to school, you have to perform. You can't be seen to need that rest period, because that would seem weak and unproductive and all the things. And so I think one of the greatest lessons that nature has for us is to literally go with the flow, to go with the flow of the seasons, to go with the flow of the cycles. And yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love that. And I agree with you. I think we have to learn to go with the flow. And I like that you brought up cycles, because I wanted to like really try to differentiate between a season and a cycle. It's something I was really thinking about. And I'm saying to myself, like we think that because the season comes around that it's a cycle. And it is in a way, but it's a part of a cycle. And that's something that we also have to think about. Like,
Hmm.
so a cycle may include several seasons. You know what I mean? Like, a
Right.
season will tell us where we are, and then the cycle helps us understand like the bigger picture of like what it is that we're going through. And it helps us to understand, like, even when I think about, I've been looking at the Fibonacci
Hmm.
sequence a lot lately. I've been seeing it a lot. A young lady that I followed, an astrologer that I follow on social media, she's always posting it, always. And the other day I was just like, I gotta look this up, even though I know, like, I'm so into sacred geometry. You know what I mean.
Hmm.
I have the abalone shells, and I've learned about it, but I was just saying to myself, like, what is the significance of it for me right now? Like, why am I constantly clicking on this girl's thing and I'm seeing it? Like, what is this supposed to show me? And it kind of was giving me, like, intuitively, I was just thinking about how, like, let's take, you know, um, a plant cycle. You know what I mean? A plant, you plant a seed, it takes root, it grows, down deep, and then it grows up, and then it blossoms, and sometimes they produce fruit or seeds. and then they die, and then, you know what I mean? That's a whole cycle, but sometimes there's been a couple seasons throughout that cycle.
Right.
And I feel like we see these cycles in nature, but we don't realize where we are in our bodies. So, like right now, as we're going, well, not to put our business out there, I'll say I'm going through perimenopause and I'm entering a new a new season of my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna be having these, like, my cycles are changing, and my body is changing, and I'm going through different things. My relationships are changing. The type of work I'm doing, like in this stage of my life, you know what I mean? And so I think that it's important to for people to really like differentiate between the two and not automatically put them together, because I feel like that's a part of the reason why we are kind of like where we are, because I feel like I hate to blame everything on patriarchy, but I feel like they I feel like they try to simplify everything and put things in neat little boxes, whereas women, we are, you know, we're more nuanced, and we're more detail oriented. And I want us to just really think about that and understand, you know, a season is more like a chapter, and a cycle could be like that journey in the book, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you know what I mean, or volume one. You know, and so I've been thinking about that a lot. You know, what season am I in my life, and what is the season requiring of me? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What cycle is ending in my life? What new cycle is beginning? You know,
Yeah.
and when you talk about nature, it's just so important for us to really, really observe nature in all its intricacies, and connect with it. You know, and after connection, I think River. um, so we talk about seasons, we talk about cycles. Let's talk about rest. You know, I think that nature has no qualms about resting. Like when I start, like I used to never go outside in the winter. Like what? Like I went to work, I came home. If I went to an event, great. You know what I mean? Like those are the types of things that I did in the winter. Like you would not catch me outside at all, right? Not I'm not going to no park. I'm not taking a walk. Like what? Like what? No. I'm not going to play in the snow. I felt so bad like not playing in the snow with my daughter when she was little all the time she wanted to. I just did not like going outside in the winter. You know, I it just wasn't my thing. I would, you know, I got sick enough to where I shied away from it, you know. And when I did do that though, and I realized and I like, I'll never forget, like I went outside, there was no leaves on the trees, but there was a couple trees that still had their leaves. They weren't flowering, but they had leaves, and I thought it was just so beautiful because I'm like, wow, these particular trees, like even though everything else is resting, like this one still has leaves, like they haven't fallen. But just observing nature at rest, it was just like it was a sight to see. I'm not gonna lie, I had just been there a month or two prior, you know, and everything was, you know, there was still flowers, there was still plenty of leaves, like everything didn't die off. And when I came and I seen how everything was at, I don't know, like I feel like I'm getting tongue tied because it was the beauty of it, you know what I mean? And then coming back and then, you know, seeing, you know, going through another phase, and, you know, now it's blooming again. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said all that to say that nature has no qualms about resting. It
Mm-hmm.
has no qualms about letting the leaves and the flowers and all that stuff fall to the ground so that it can rest. Now, during that rest, from what I've learned about plant cycles, there is nutrients and there is, you know, growth being built deep within so that she can blossom again. But for right now, she's taking a rest, you know. And so I feel like, you know, if you we talk about it in layman's terms, like in terms of like what we go through, again, we live in a world that doesn't allow us to rest. Like you, if you are resting, people call you lazy. No one considers your exhaustion, how hard you worked. People, I almost said MFers. I'm so sorry. Because I get a little upset because there's times when you need rest, but you can't because the people around you don't. You know what I mean? So we have to take rest as a what's the word I'm looking for? Like almost like we have to fight for our rest, you know, and that's not a natural thing, you know, when you work in real community and when you have you know, people who are around you that want to work with you, they understand that there may be a time when they need to rest, there may be a time when you need to rest, and rest does not have to be earned, and it doesn't have to be done when everything is finished because nothing is ever really finished. There's
Right.
always something else to do.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't know. Umi, if you want to talk about rest or if you want to talk about growth, either one is fine.
Well, I'll probably talk a little bit about both. So the rest when it comes to plants, like you said, you know, plants nature, it doesn't have any qualms about rest, but we think that rest means nothing is happening, right?
Right.
And that's not true, not even with our human bodies. When we rest, our bodies are recovering, our bodies are, you know, fixing things in our bodies, in our bloodstreams, in our muscles, and it's repairing, it's rejuvenating. You know, there are things that are actually happening just like in nature. You know, when plants are dormant, they're not just not moving. They're not just not growing, you know. They're storing their energy. They are preparing for the springtime, you know, getting ready for springtime. They're growing their roots because the ground stays warmer than the, you know, the air, and so they continue to grow roots. Lots of plants have to have a season of dormancy in order for them to reach maturity, because that dormancy signals, okay, it's time to move to another stage, another cycle, another, you know, season. It's time, a season of growth. And so, you know, there's even plants whose seeds require like a chilling time so that they can, you know, break dormancy and actually sprout. And so all of that rest period in nature is used so that the growth season is maximized, right? And so I feel like this rest and growth, they really do need to go hand in hand. We don't realize that by not resting, we are holding back our growth, or we are limiting our growth, right? Because we're not giving ourselves a chance to recover. We're not giving that. And then the other thing is the human brain, you know, we solidify memories while we sleep. Again, rest is so important. If you're not getting enough rest, you're going to have trouble with memory. You know, we hold ourselves back by being this culture of people who are just always going. Like we pride ourselves that New York is the city that never sleeps. Well, it's not really something to be proud of. You know,
It's
it's
not with all
really
the craziness going on,
right.
especially.
It's not anything to
Get
be
some
proud of.
rest.
Get some sleep. Yeah, get some rest. You know, and so if we really want good growth, if we want productive growth, if we want growth in the direction of what we're trying to achieve and attain and in our highest and greatest good, then we have to respect those cycles of rest. When our body is asking for rest, and sometimes it's not just about our bodies resting. Sometimes you need to give a project a rest. Sometimes you are doing too much on something at a time when you don't need to. And this goes back to our times of talking about meditation and stillness and listening and following your guidance and all of those things. It all comes back into play, because if spirit is saying now is a season of rest, I don't care if it's midsummer, you're like, I need to move. No, if spirit is saying take a rest now, there may be something in the background that's lining up. You know what I mean? And so we have to understand that as humans, we are a part of a bigger whole. And so, just like sometimes you need your feet to rest, but maybe you can be on your computer doing something, but your feet need to break. So you need to sit down and put your feet up for a little while, right? We need to be in tune with where rest is needed. It's not just our bodies. Sometimes it's an activity. Sometimes you have to put things away, You have to physically put things away, get it out of the way and let it rest. Our houses, need rest. Our cars need rest. All of this, like, we really need to be in tune with that, because when it does come for times of growth, if you haven't had sufficient rest, or if you're not getting sufficient rest through the process, those memories are not going to solidify. You're not going to have as good a growth. um, you can stall out. I don't know if you've ever like put a plant out too soon before that winter rest period isn't is over. It will stall out in its growth for longer than a plant. Then you wait. you know if you try to put stuff out in March before last frost, and you go ahead and put that tomato out there, right? You put that plant, it's not going to grow. It's going to be stunted. It's going to be stunted. And then if you wait a month until it's warm and it's the correct season and it's no longer a rest season, and you put that same type of plant in the ground right next to that one that you put out in March, that one will grow significantly faster and produce way more fruit, because it had the opportunity to benefit from that season of rest, right? So I think that the rest and growth go hand in hand. Like, there's no way that you should be having one without the other.
I agree. Thank you so much. I agree. I remember thinking to myself, and I feel like I'm gonna always refer back to quarantine when I was actually able to rest. And during that time, that the rest helped me grow in ways that I became more discerning. I became more honest with myself. I became more responsible with where I put my energy. I became more honest about where, like, kind of like where I belonged and where I didn't. Like, the growth really came when I allowed myself to grow, and it helped me to, excuse me, when I allowed myself to rest, and it helped me be more aligned with who I truly am. And I feel like if I did not have that period of rest and reflection, also, I wouldn't have been able, I would still be where I was before, like totally miserable, totally, like totally. You know what I mean? And so, growth, in a plant will be, how it shoots up, or how well it roots first, how it shoots up, the fruit, the harvest, and all that good stuff. And then in some, some come back annually. You know what I mean? They're perennials. What are the ones that come back? Okay.
Oh, perennials.
Okay. Umi knows better than me, but okay. So, some are perennials, they come back, you know what I mean? And they grow again. And we can too throughout life. Sometimes growth is saying yes, sometimes growth is saying no. Sometimes it's not running and standing still. Sometimes it's moving forward. There's so many different ways to think about that. And it's really about understanding, and making sure that the rest helps you support the growth that you are doing. You know what I mean? It gives you that good foundation. So thank you so much for that, Omi, and pointing out how they work hand in hand. I agree wholeheartedly. And next, we wanted to talk about kind of like the death cycle and how, during certain times of year, specifically, we know during the fall and winter, the leaves start to fall. You know what I mean? The flowers start to wilt, the fruit falls to the ground and it gets all icky and it starts to decay and decompose. Is that a word?
Decompose. Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, wait, there's a word. Um, Branches break. Sometimes animals, people, you know what I mean? Like there's a time for living and there's a time for death. And we have to be honest with that, no matter how we may not want to, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
But death goes beyond that as well. You know what I mean? There may be an identity change. You may die to your old self. They talk about that in the Bible all the time. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Hmm.
A relationship may end. You may close a chapter of your life. You may have to let go of a dream. I was thinking about that earlier today. It's like, wow, I really used to dream about X, Y, and Z, but no, I have to have to let
Let
that
that go.
die.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's not going to happen. And like you said earlier, I don't know if we were on here or if we were. I think we was in our pre-meet, and you were saying how we have these ideas about life, but sometimes it just doesn't go like that, and we have to let it go. We have to let it die.
Yep.
And some endings can be painful. You may know
Hmm.
it's the truth. You may know it's necessary. You may know it, not all endings are beautiful, and they're
Right.
not all bittersweet either. Sometimes they're bitter. You know what I mean? Sometimes there's bitter. But the thing when it comes to nature, the thing that I love about nature is, as long as we're living, endings allow us for new beginnings. You know what I mean? But before we talk about the new beginnings, I want to just say that accepting that things have to end. I mean, I've been following this true crime case, and a woman who she broke up with the boyfriend and she was stalking him and his girlfriends, and it was she didn't want to let it die. The relationship, he had shown her who he was. He moved on. You know what I mean? She
Hmm.
didn't want to die, and now the young lady is 32 years old, sitting in prison for the rest of her life because she
Mm.
didn't want to let it die.
Right.
And that's just an extreme example, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I feel like because we're not able to do it on a smaller level, that there's
Yeah.
always those things where it's like 2020 when you're like, well, the signs. So I looked at her social media. Y'all, I go there with true crime, but people are now like, oh, the signs were all there. The signs were, you know what I mean? It seems
Yeah.
small, but it's there. And so I said that to say that, really accepting endings in our life and
Hmm.
not holding on to them, and observing how nature allows things to end. But she knows that as long as the sun rises again, she decides sometimes I don't want to say he or she when it comes to nature, God, the universe, you know what I mean? But if nature decides that we're going to have another day, if the universe or the powers that be say it's going to be listen, there is room for something else to grow, but sometimes we have to let things die in order
Hmm.
to see the new beginning. So, yeah, Umi, what you got, sis?
Yeah, I think death is just the other side of birth, right? It really is. And I feel like if we took this lesson from nature, which the plants die back every season, you know, they die back in the wintertime, even perennial plants, they die back. There are some that stay evergreen. There are some, but the majority of them will die all the way back to the ground and still come back next year, you know? But I think what we don't realize is that every death is the birth of something new, just like every birth is the death of something old, you know? Even the birth of a child is the death of that mother's like maidenhood. You know, it is it's also the death of her childhood because I mean you're not necessarily a child in your 20s, but you're not really an adult.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you have a child, you are an adult whether you want to be or not.
Listen.
You know, but it is the death of that time. You know, it's the same with like graduation of school. It's the death of your time of being a student, which now is putting you out into the world to be a productive member of society in the workforce or as an entrepreneur, whatever your, you know, occupation is in the world. You know, we really need to understand the death birth cycle more and to be able to, just like the plants, allow things to go, allow things to be let go. You know, there's it could hoarders are my example that it's coming to my mind right now. It's like they don't want to let things go.
Mhm.
You can't let it go, and you just end up cluttering your house full of dead things because they're not being productive, they're not being used, you know what I mean? There's no space for growth, there's no space for anything new, right? You're just stuck. You know, kind of like the woman that you were talking about, like she was just stuck and she just, you know, wouldn't let it die. You know, I that's really what I have is I know that it's hard when we think about death because we think about death of humans and we think about the death of people, and even that is, it's a part of this great cycle. It's a hard part. It is a very hard part. I'm not going to discount death because it is a very hard part, you know, to accept. You know, the death of one's parents is the beginning of, you know, is the birth of an orphan. Even as an adult, you know what I mean? You still have that feeling of being an orphan.
Yeah.
And so this cycle of death and birth, there's so much to be gained through it. And I feel that if we could come to terms a little more, and I'm saying this as if it's easy, but I do understand that particularly when it comes to humans, letting go of humans, not just humans, pets, you know what I mean? Um, things that we've bonded with, people that we've bonded with, animals that we've bonded with, that it is very hard to accept that death cycle, right? That, or I should say, that death is part of that cycle, you know? But if we could just learn to be more fluid with it, to understand that it is a natural part of life, that it's inevitable, that it's beneficial even, you know, which is, I know, very hard. It's very hard.
Yeah.
I don't want to discount that at all. But I think if we could learn to do it with the smaller things, like the ending of a relationship, if we could learn to do it with the smaller things, like throwing out that thing we don't use anymore, you know, if we can learn to do it with things like that job that's no longer fulfilling, you know, letting these things go and embracing something new. If you want anything new in your life, if you want anything that you don't currently have, there's probably something that you need to let go of in your life right now. Like right now. Even if it's the death of your lack of faith, you know, and to be born again as a believer. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking about born again in Christ. We're not talking about that. We're talking about being born again in faith. That's a whole different thing. Okay.
Right.
But yeah, that's what I think about the death and birth cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I agree wholeheartedly. We have to learn how to let go of things because I feel like when we don't we so the next point we have is renewal. Okay. So like you said, with death and comes birth, with birth comes with death, and vice versa.
Right.
I'm getting tongue tied. What the hell?
Right.
But they go hand in hand, and I feel we live in such a world that we feel like there's this thing I feel that is kind of like a subconscious programming that we have with like scarcity mindset. And the scarcity mindset, it when we watch um television and movies and things like that, or even when we listen to music, you hear people fixated on one person or one thing. I
Right.
just got to have this job. I just got to have this person. I just got to have this relationship. I just got to have this lifestyle. They steal, they do all types of things, scam. You know what I mean? I just got to have that. And they're willing to do anything to get just that, not realizing that sometimes that is not the thing for you. There's so much more out there, and if you, like you said, if you let something die and be reborn, or let your mind be renewed, again, I try not to be a Bible thumper, but I've I've spent a lot of time in the Bible, and so the thought of renewal, is another point that we really wanted to talk about, because it is kind of like life after death. You know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that you necessarily get, and you were talking about this in our preview, like you may not get what you want or what you thought you wanted or needed, but there's a new beginning. There's a new, um, there's a new landscape. You know what I mean? Like there's new life that's able to emerge if we allow certain things to go, you know? And I feel like sometimes people feel like if you have to let something go, like they don't lean into renewal because they think that it diminishes the value of what was or what might have been. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's true. I mean, I have a million and one ideas. I have, sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I would have did this. I wish I would have did that. But I feel like a lot of times the thing that I end up doing is the thing that I was right what I was supposed to be doing all along. And maybe it took me going through these cycles and letting these things go, and allowing my mind to be renewed, and allowing myself to sit with things and say, okay, this is the thing for me. You know what I mean? And I'm not forcing nobody to make space for renewal or anything like that, but I think there's, like you said, there's something about letting go. You give other people an opportunity to maybe enjoy what was once yours. So you talk about hoarders, right? They may have clothing, appliances, whatever, things that someone, okay, you're piling all this stuff on, someone else might be able to use that. Whereas you just got it sitting in the corner collecting dust and dirt. And it's like, what is really going on the inside? And they talk about, and I've watched the show Hoarders, and I'm not going to lie, the psychology of some of those people is scary to me. It's very scary how they hold on to things. And so you can only imagine what they're holding on to on the inside. They're not allowing freshness and renewal to come into their life, you know? And so I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent on renewal. We had a whole bunch of points we wanted to get to. Do you have anything on renewal before we go to the next thing? Oh, is it me or you muted?
I'm muted. River
Oh,
was barking again. I said we can move on to the next point.
okay. Thank you. So we wanted to also talk about the sacred practice of paying attention. And if you're just joining us, thank you for being here. This is Earth School Journey. I am your co host, Uni, and this is my co host and sister, Umi Steph. And we are on episode 54 this week, and we're talking about living our oneness through nature. And one of the things we really wanted to dive into is how nature is really always speaking to us. And if we just pay attention, there's a lot to be gained from it. And I know for me, for one, I was telling Umi recently how when I first started going out into nature, like first I just started watching the sunrise, which was cool. I loved it, and I kept going after that. I would sit in my car because where I was, it was winter time. Again, I'm outside in the winter. Never did this before. And so I'm sitting in my car watching the sun come up. I got my coffee. I'm having a moment. I'm just like in awe and in gratitude. Like, wow, this is beautiful. And it was I think it's the thing that caught me was the awe. It was like, wow, you know, the sun is coming up, and I just started to have these feelings about renewal, about rising up, about achieving my goals, about like there was just all these things that were coming to me. And listen, I'm the type of person that I have a great imagination as it is. So maybe you don't get the same messages when you watch the sunrise, but I do. I mean, I'm telling you, I mean, it gave me hope. Even though I'm not going to say I didn't have hope at the time, I did, but I felt like my sense of hope was renewed, or it was like it just really caught me in the heart. And I think there was just like this awe, like this wonder, this like wow. And going on different days and seeing um some days it was kind of like a bluish, it was more blue in the sky. Other days it was like a deep gold. Other days it was white. Like just seeing the different colors as well, and really being in awe about that. And me being so into frequencies and color healing and all of those things, the chakras. And I'm telling you, I mean, it just, I'm just like, wow. And
Yeah.
that's how my relationship really started with nature. There was like this awness because the messages that it was given, get first, okay, it started with the curiosity, the wonder, where I was like, oh, let me go out, let me see. I talked last week about how um Brother Armani was on Clubhouse talking about, going out into nature. And so, I'm like, let me go out here and see what, I want to feel what he's feeling. And that's when the awe came in because like I said, it was just drawing me in day after day after day. And it gave me an opportunity to really feel these things from nature that I never felt before. And mind you, I was at this point, I was just sitting in the car observing. You know what
Yep.
I mean?
Yep.
And it was just a beautiful thing to observe and to be and to be fully present with nature. I mean, I'm kind of like merging and skipping around, but
It's fine. No
it was
worries.
it just gave me a really good opportunity to be present with nature and observing, and then to observe myself and like, why am I feeling like, why is the sun rising giving me hope? Like I just started thinking about that. I started asking those questions of myself, like, wow, like just seeing the sunrise, it inspires me. It makes me feel
Yeah.
like I can do anything. I want to go out and conquer the world. Like, what is this? You know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that relationship, just even just starting that relationship with nature It's absolutely beautiful. Umi, what you got?
Wow. So as you were talking, and you're talking about like the wonder and the awe. I mean, just thinking about some of the natural wonders that exist. I was thinking about Fajardo Bay in Puerto Rico with the bioluminescence,
Mm,
the organisms that like turn this bioluminescent greenish blue when you disturb the water, like the aurora borealis, the northern lights, like sequoias. The fact that sequoias even exist, that they are so huge and so wonderful and so beautiful. There's so many ways that Mother Earth just, you won't have words because of how beautiful things are, and what it can inspire in you. We are, nature fanatics, so we sunrises do it for us, sunsets, oh my gosh, beautiful sunsets, love them. um you can just look at some tree bark.
hmm
Ever look at a tree up close, different trees too, like you start to notice, oh my god, this tree has this pattern, and look, there are bugs, there are ants, there's life in that tree bark, like you don't even realize it. And this all goes into observation and silence, and you really start to observe. It doesn't have to be something as big as the northern lights, and it doesn't have to be something as big as a sequoia, or even, the bioluminescent bay in Puerto Rico. Like it doesn't have to be that big. It can be, what do you notice about grass that you never noticed before? Dirt, soil, different types of soil. When I started gardening and I learned about all the things that are in soil, like it's awe-inspiring. Oh my god, you think it's just dirt. No, there are organisms living in there. Nutrients, water, clay, sand, rock. And if you don't take the time to really look, you won't have that sense of awe or wonder, because you haven't invested any of yourself in it to know it. And that's where that relationship really starts, is when you slow down enough to pay attention, to be present enough to be like, oh my god, how amazing is this? You know? And yeah, I mean, we're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to stop there. We had so much more to cover, but we'll get to
we,
it. We have 5 weeks, so
yeah,
we
that's
can
a
throw
good
an extra
point.
in there.
That's such a good point. I love that. Um, yeah, and just to finish out this topic, listening to nature as well. Like
Yeah.
once you first you start to see it, then you're like, oh, okay, what's going on? You're in awe. You listen to, like, you put your phone down, you know what I mean, you turn
Hmm.
off the radio, and whatever it is that you got to do, your brain you even stop thinking, you know what I mean, sometimes, because you're starting to have that relationship with nature, and then you start to listen. Like, I feel like I didn't start to listen to the birds until after a little while. Like, at first I was like kind of like hearing them, but I didn't really start to pay attention and listen. You know what I mean? Like after a while I'm like, okay, there's a bird over here with a distinctive sound, and a certain cadence to their chirping, and there's one over here that's squawking, and there's one over there that, you know what I mean? You
Hmm.
really start to listen. You listen for the trees rustling in the wind, or the leaves rather. You listen to the grass or the dirt under your feet, or if there's like rocks or wood. Like, I'm telling you, listening is the next step in
Yeah.
really communing and getting close to nature. You start to
Mhm.
pay attention, the leaves rustling under your feet, and then you want to you want to walk through leaves. I know I'm like a big kid. I'd rather walk through the leaves than hear the
Yeah.
rustling and crunching under my feet. You know,
Yeah. Mhm.
and it's just such a beautiful thing because I feel like that listening offers like a natural discernment, you know what I mean? So you and there's levels and layers to it, you know. There again, like the crunching under your feet, or if it's a rock, if it's rocks, and there's kind of like, instead of crunching, it's a different kind of sound, you know what I mean? And so there's like a discernment that you start to have, and you start to
Mhm.
understand that there's so many different, um, ways to really to listen. And don't get me wrong, you don't have to force meaning on everything. That's just my way of thinking, but I feel like I don't know, like I feel like the more I started to pay attention to nature, and the more I started to like expand the different senses with it. So it went from just seeing to, to touching. Touching the leaves, to smelling, pulling them off, and breaking them or rubbing them between my fingers. And like some of them smell amazing. You wouldn't even know, And then listening and just really engaging all my senses in nature. And I mean, I'm telling you, when I did this, I was doing it on my own. Like I had never heard anyone mention it or anything like that. I just started going, oh, let me see what this one smells like, or let me see, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Come to find out, there's a
Yeah.
whole thing called forest bathing, and you can connect with nature in that way. And I'll never forget. Now, I had done it at like local parks and stuff, but when I did it in this forest, I'm telling you, when I came out, it felt like like a cleansing had happened.
Mhm.
Like literally, I was smelling different branches. I'm like, oh, pine, oh, juniper, oh, you know what I mean? Oh, this, whatever it was that was out there. I'm looking at the trees. I'm observing the sky. I'm listening to the water. I put my hands in the water. I did all of these things, and I realized that, connecting to nature in this way, I was allowed to be fully present in the moment, and that presence helped to clear some blockages and help to it got me out of the rumination and the constant thinking and the he did this and she said that, and it was just a beautiful thing. And I feel like I got this connection with nature, and I started to commune with nature because I would go back. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I would go back at certain times, and there were even times when I bought things as an offering, and I started to be familiar with the places that I was going to, and I just gained such an appreciation for nature. Like, I mean, I could go on and on. I'm sorry, Umi. I'm gonna let you have the floor because
Oh, I just want real quick. We were talking about listening. Every year, Christy and I wait for the cicadas. That is the thing we listen for, because the sound of
really,
cicadas. I don't know what's so special about it to us, but it is a very special and very specific sound. And so every year when cicadas come out, it's like, I heard the cicadas. Did you hear the cicadas? You know what I mean? Like, it's just such
wow,
a, I don't know what it is. There's a feeling that comes along with hearing cicadas that
wow,
I just think is amazing. And then, and it's something that we share, so it not only builds our relationship to nature, but our relationships to one another. And the other, really quick, both of these have to do with Christy because she's my sound guru. Christy started as the lawnmower starts to go behind me. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but there's a lawnmower going behind me. Christy bought a really high powered microphone because she started a YouTube channel where she was doing sounds, nature sounds. And until we like put that microphone out, and it's connected to the headphones because you want to hear what it's picking up specifically. And then you would just, she'd be like listening to it. She goes, "Oh my god, you got to hear this. Listen to this." And she like take the headphones off and put them on my head, and she's like, "Oh my god, do you hear that?" Because the microphone was so strong and powerful and pointed that you would pick up sounds of different things that you couldn't hear with your natural ear. So you would hear frogs that were like in the soil. You could hear the water running, the currents. You could hear, like, there are so many different things that, just when it comes to listening, like, you also mentioned smell. I'm not going to keep going. I just had to mention those two things because you you want to talk about being in awe and in wonder. Like, get you a microphone that can hear better than your ears, put some headphones on. You're gonna hear things that you're gonna be, I mean, just the beating of like insects' wings and butterflies and dragonflies and all of that. Like, those sounds, when you really pay attention to them and listen, they're just amazing. So I
They
think that's all we
are.
got time for today.
It is. It is. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We could go on and on and on about nature and living our oneness with nature. And we hope that you got something out of it. We hope that there's something that you can take from it. Maybe you go pick a leaf, and if sometimes you can't just break it. Sometimes you gotta, like, really rub it between your fingers to get the essence. But I'm telling you, if you do one thing, do that and report back to uh this episode and let us know. Tell us how it made you feel. Tell us if you felt the awe, if you felt the wonder, if you felt more present, if it made you, be silent for a moment and get extremely present. I'd really love to hear that. And again, thank you so much for joining us, guys. This has been, so much fun. This has been, again, Earth School Journey, where life is the curriculum and experience is the teacher. I am Uni, and this is Umi Steph, and we will see you next week, same time, same place. Peace.
Peace.